Test. Okay.
Republican enthusiasm and optimism.
Nothing here.
Just me. Oh, Shroud is too.
Nice.
Close the door behind us. You know.
What's that?
The ladder.
Oh, okay. I think we can go downstairs.
Good day, and welcome to the Apple Incorporated fourth quarter fiscal year 2018 earnings conference call. Today's call is being recorded. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I would like to turn the call over to Nancy Paxton, Senior Director of Investor Relations. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Speaking first today is Apple CEO Tim Cook, and he'll be followed by CFO Luca Maestri. And after that, we'll open the call to questions from analysts. Please note that some of the information you'll hear during our discussion today will consist of forward-looking statements, including, without limitation, those regarding revenue, gross margin, operating expenses, other income and expense, taxes, capital allocation, and future business outlook. Actual results or trends could differ materially from our forecast. For more information, please refer to the risk factors discussed in Apple's most recently filed periodic reports on Form 10-K and Form 10-Q, and the Form 8-K filed with the SEC today, along with the associated press release. Apple assumes no obligation to update any forward-looking statements or information which speak as of their respective dates. I'd now like to turn the call over to Tim for introductory remarks.
Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining
today,
us.
Along with the
I just got back from Brooklyn, where we marked our fourth major launch event of the year. In addition to being a great time, it put an exclamation point at the end of a remarkable fiscal 2018. This year, we shipped our 2 billionth iOS device, celebrated the 10th anniversary of the App Store, and achieved the strongest revenue and earnings in Apple's history. In fiscal year 18, our revenue grew by $36.4 billion. That's the equivalent of a Fortune 100 company in a single year. And we're capping all that off with our best September quarter ever. Revenue was $62.9 billion, ahead of our expectations. That's an increase of 20% over last year and our highest growth rate in 3 years. We also generated record Q4 earnings with 41% year-over-year growth in EPS. Record results from iPhone, services, and wearables drove our momentum, and we produced strong double-digit revenue growth in all of our geographic segments. It was a big year and a big quarter for iPhone. Q4 revenue was up 29% over last year, an increase of over $8 billion to a new September quarter record, fueled by continued momentum for iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and 10, and the very successful launch of iPhone XS and iPhone XS Max. These latest devices are our most advanced iPhones ever, with the industry's first 7-nanometer A12 Bionic chip with an Apple-designed 8-core neural engine capable of executing an astounding 5 trillion operations per second. The A12 Bionic is many years in the making and a huge technological leap forward. It sets the iPhone experience far apart from the competition, using real-time machine learning to transform the way we experience photos, gaming, augmented reality, and more. It makes full use of the dual camera system that shoots portrait mode photos with smart HDR and dynamic depth of field, and Face ID is even faster. The response has been powerful. As one reviewer put it, iPhone XS and XS Max are the perfect blend of design and craftsmanship, as well as seamlessly intuitive user experience. We're not done yet. Just last week, we began shipping iPhone XR, bringing the latest iPhone breakthroughs to even more users. With an all-screen glass and aluminum design and the most advanced LCD in a smartphone, the product reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. iOS 12 has gotten off to an incredible start. It's been installed on more systems in its first month than any version of iOS ever. iOS 12 is delivering system-wide performance enhancements, Siri shortcuts, and new tools to help people reduce interruptions and manage screen time for themselves and their kids. Siri shortcuts, in particular, is already deeply integrated with some of the most popular apps out there. Whether you're tracking your workouts or rushing to catch a flight, you can be sure all of your most relevant apps are working together with Siri in the driver's seat. iOS 12 also features ARKit 2, a major upgrade to our augmented reality engine. ARKit 2 makes possible simultaneous multi-user experiences and real-world object incorporation. Our developer community is really running with this technology. From gaming to shopping, we're seeing great new use cases emerge. iOS devices deliver the best AR experiences of any products in the market today, and with the announcement of our new iPad Pro this week, we've made that gap even wider. More powerful than the vast majority of PC laptops, the new iPad Pro is unrivaled in its versatility and performance. When paired with a beautifully refined Apple Pencil and a new streamlined full-size smart keyboard, iPad Pro will extend its lead as the ultimate creativity and productivity device. And finally, just this week, we delivered the highly anticipated group FaceTime functionality to all FaceTime-enabled devices. For services, it was our best quarter ever, with revenue of $10 billion. Excluding the impact of a favorable one-time accounting adjustment of $640 million a year ago, our services growth was 27%. We set new Q4 records in all of our geographic segments and new all-time revenue records for the App Store, cloud services, AppleCare, Apple Music, and Apple Pay. We also continue to see strong growth in paid subscriptions, reaching over 330 million in our ecosystem. I want to spotlight the exceptional performance of Apple Pay, which is by far the #1 mobile contactless payment service worldwide. Transaction volume tripled year over year, and to put that into perspective, Apple Pay generated significantly more transactions than even PayPal Mobile, with over 4 times the growth rate. As a testament to accelerating U.S. growth, Costco completed the rollout of Apple Pay to over 500 U.S. warehouses last quarter, while Neiman Marcus is now accepting Apple Pay at over 40 stores across the country. With these additions, 71 of the top 100 merchants and 60% of all U.S. retail locations support Apple Pay. We continue to invest in our strategy to replace the wallet with the recent launch of student ID passes at several major U.S. universities. And 10 months following its launch, Apple Pay Cash is the highest rated mobile peer-to-peer service by Consumer Reports based on exceptional payment authentication and data privacy. We set an all-time quarterly record for Mac revenue thanks to strong performance in MacBook Pro and the impact of the back-to-school season. In September, we delivered macOS Mojave, bringing powerful new features to Mac like dark mode, stacks, and a completely redesigned Mac App Store. Considered alongside the release of iOS 12, watchOS 5, and a new tvOS, macOS Mojave tells a powerful story of the seamless integration of world-class hardware, software, and services that define the Apple ecosystem. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, earlier this week we announced exciting updates to the Mac lineup. The all-new MacBook Air brings a stunning Retina display, Touch ID, the latest processors, and an even more portable design to the world's most beloved notebook. We also unveiled the biggest update ever to Mac Mini, the small yet muscular desktop that powers everything from the music and sound effects at Broadway shows to the developers who build some of the most popular apps in the App Store. The new Mac Mini boasts an amazing 5 times faster performance than before. With revenue growth over 50%, it was another record quarter for wearables, which includes Apple Watch, AirPods, and Beats products. With the highest customer satisfaction in the industry, Apple Watch has become an essential part of people's lives. The customer response to the Apple Watch Series 4 has been overwhelmingly positive, driven by its all-new design, larger display, faster performance, fall detection, enhanced cellular reception, and electrical heart sensor. Later this year, the ECG app will be available to Apple Watch Series 4 customers in the U.S., giving them the ability to take an electrocardiogram anytime, right from their wrist. And for U.S. customers with Apple Watch Series 1 and later, watchOS will soon enable periodic checks for irregular heart rhythms that may be suggestive of AFib. These are unprecedented and potentially life-changing features, showing how Apple Watch is not only an indispensable communication and fitness companion, but also an intelligent guardian for your health. More broadly, we see this as just one further example of the kind of contribution we can make in the health space, and we look forward to making more in the future. We are proud to bring HomePod to new customers. I was in Spain last week as HomePod became available there and in Mexico. HomePod delivers the highest fidelity audio quality, working together with an Apple Music subscription to stream over 50 million songs into any room of your home. Our retail team posted record Q4 results to conclude their biggest year ever. They are transforming our stores into places where customers come to connect, learn, and be inspired together with people from their community. Our Today at Apple sessions are a terrific example of what that looks like in practice. We hosted over 250,000 Today at Apple sessions this quarter, connecting aspiring creators with local photographers, illustrators, and other experts who can help them get the most out of their devices. Apple stores also hosted 74,000 kids at Apple Camp. The relationship Apple has with our customers is about more than just making a purchase. With the recent addition of beautiful new stores in Italy, Japan, China, and in just a few weeks, Thailand, we will have 506 stores where we can further those relationships, almost half of which are outside the United States. Before I turn the call over to Luca, I'd like to touch on two items that may not show up in our financial statements, but are just as integral to Apple's mission and our commitment to making the world a better place. First, education. More than 5,000 schools, community colleges, and technical colleges worldwide are now using Everyone Can Code, our free coding curriculum. Ideas, creativity, and passion for technology's potential aren't limited by zip code or country, and we don't think opportunity should be either. We're also excited that educators in more than 350 schools around the world have started working with Everyone Can Create, the free collection of tools and project guides we introduced this spring, designed to help unleash kids' creativity throughout their school day with the help of iPad. Next is the environment. This was a milestone year for Apple's commitment to our planet. In April, we announced that 100% of our global operations are powered by renewable energy. We also made progress in doing the same in our supply chain. And just this week, we announced that the enclosures of new products like MacBook Air and iPad Pro will be made from 100% recycled aluminum, a strong, durable, and beautiful new alloy designed by Apple. This is a great example of how a commitment to do right on the issues that matter can drive once unimaginable innovation, new ways of approaching old problems, and beautiful solutions that set us apart. I'd like to thank all of our employees, customers, developers, and business partners for helping us deliver outstanding results across our fiscal 2018. We are headed into the holidays with our strongest product lineup ever, and we could not be more bullish about Apple's future. And now, Luca has more details to share with you on the September quarter. Luca?
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. We are extremely pleased to report record results for our September quarter, which capped a tremendously successful fiscal 2018, a year in which we saw double-digit revenue growth in every geographic segment and established new revenue and earnings records in every single quarter. Revenue in the fourth quarter was $62.9 billion, up 20% and more than $10 billion over last year, with strong double-digit growth in each of our geographic segments and record Q4 revenue in the Americas, in Europe, Japan, and rest of Asia Pacific. In fact, we set new revenue records in almost every market we track, with especially strong growth in Germany, Italy, Sweden, Switzerland, Japan, and Korea, all major markets where revenue growth was 25% or higher. We also set new fourth quarter revenue records for iPhone and wearables, and new all-time records for services and Mac. Gross margin was 38.3%, flat sequentially and in line with our expectations, as leverage from higher revenue offset seasonal transition costs. We set new September quarter records for net income, EPS, and cash flow from operations. Net income was $14.1 billion, up $3.4 billion or 32% over last year. Diluted earnings per share were $2.91, up 41%. Cash flow from operations was $19.5 billion, up $3.8 billion from a year ago. iPhone revenue grew 29%, with growth of more than 20% in every geographic segment. iPhone ASP was $793 compared to $618 a year ago, driven by strong performance of iPhone X, 8, and 8 Plus, as well as the successful launch of iPhone XS and XS Max in the September quarter this year, while we launched iPhone X in the December quarter. last year. We sold 46.9 million iPhones during the quarter, with growth of 20% or more in several markets, including Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Norway, Chile, and Vietnam. Customer satisfaction with iPhone continues to be outstanding and is the highest in the industry. The latest survey of U.S. consumers from 451 Research indicates customer satisfaction of 98% for iPhone X, 8 and 8 Plus combined. And among business buyers who plan to purchase smartphones in the December quarter, 80% plan to purchase iPhones. Turning to services, it was our best quarter ever in total and virtually in every market around the world, with revenue of $10 billion. A year ago, we had a one-time $640 million favorable impact to services revenue due to an accounting adjustment, and taking that into account, our services growth in Q4 this year was 27%. As Tim mentioned, we reached new all-time quarterly revenue records for many services categories, and we are well on our way to achieve our goal to double our fiscal 2016 services revenue by 2020. We now have over 330 million paid subscriptions on our platform, an increase of over 50% versus a year ago. We are very pleased not only with the growth, but also with the breadth of our subscription business. In fact, 30,000 third-party subscription apps are available on the App Store today, and the largest of them all represents less than 0.3% of our total services revenue. Next, I'd like to talk about the Mac. We saw great response to our new MacBook Pro models that we launched in July, with strong double-digit revenue growth, driving an all-time quarterly record for Mac revenue. We were especially pleased with Mac momentum in emerging markets, with strong growth in Latin America, in India, the Middle East and Africa, and Central and Eastern Europe. At over 100 million units, our active installed base of Macs is at an all-time high, and the majority of customer purchasing Macs in the September quarter were new to Mac. We sold 9.7 million iPads during the quarter, gaining share in nearly every market we track based on the latest estimates from IDC. We generated iPad growth in a number of key regions around the world, including Latin America, Europe, Japan, India, and South Asia. Among customers around the world purchasing iPads during the quarter, nearly half were new to iPad, and our active installed base of iPads reached a new all-time high. NPD indicates that iPad had 58% share of the U.S. tablet market in the September quarter, up from 54% share a year ago. And the most recent consumer survey from 451 Research measured iPad customer satisfaction ratings of 96% for both iPad and iPad Pro. And among business customers who plan to purchase tablets in the December quarter, 74% plan to purchase iPads. Other products revenue grew 31% to a new September quarter record, with an increase of over $1 billion compared to a year ago, thanks to wearables growth of over 50% and the strong performance of Apple TV, in addition to the introduction of HomePod earlier this year. As we look back across fiscal 2018, we have made great progress in the enterprise market, where iOS is transforming how business gets done across multiple industries. In fact, over 450 airlines and 47 of the top 50 around the world have adopted iOS to help pilots fly safer, more efficient flights. And many airlines are also using iOS to support better customer experiences and improve maintenance operations. We're also making great strides in the retail sector, where 9 of the top 10 global retailers use iOS devices to transform their customer and employee experiences. We are seeing industry-wide adoption of iOS at thousands of retailers, from neighborhood boutiques to many of the best-known retailers in the world. Deployment of iOS devices is growing steadily as retailers replace their traditional point-of-sale systems and use custom iOS apps on iPhones and iPads to provide highly personalized shopping experiences. Our success in enterprise is supported by our key partnerships. Since launching our first strategic partnership with IBM, 240 large customers have signed Mobile First for iOS deals. Additionally, earlier in the year, we introduced 2 new technology offerings, IBM Watson Services for Core ML and the IBM Cloud Developer Console for Apple, that are enabling businesses to combine machine learning and cloud for a new generation of dynamic smart apps made for iOS. Over 60 new signings across numerous industries have been added since launching these new tools. In our new partnership with Salesforce, we're excited to bring together the #1 customer relationship management platform and iOS. Together with Apple, Salesforce is redesigning its apps to embrace the native mobile platform with exclusive new features on iOS. The companies will also provide tools and resources for millions of Salesforce developers to build their own native apps with the new Salesforce Mobile SDK for iOS. And finally, we recently announced Apple Business Manager, a new way for IT teams to deploy Apple devices at scale. The response from companies around the world has been tremendous, with over 40,000 companies currently enrolled. Let me now turn to our cash position. We ended the quarter with $237.1 billion in cash plus marketable securities. We also had $102.5 billion in term debt.
And in North Dakota, too early to call. Heidi Heitkamp, tough rate.
Calls to make Minnesota.
In commercial paper outstanding for a net cash position of $122.6 billion. As explained earlier this year, it is our plan to reach a net cash neutral position over time. As part of this plan, we returned over $23 billion to investors during the quarter. We repurchased 92.5 million Apple shares for $19.4 billion through open market transactions, and we paid $3.5 billion in dividends and equivalents. For our fiscal year 2018, revenue grew over $36 billion to $265.6 billion, an all-time record. Every geographic segment grew double digits, with new records in the Americas, Europe, Japan, and rest of Asia Pacific. We also set new all-time records for net income, up 23% versus last year, and EPS, up 29%. And we returned a total of almost $90 billion to our investors during the year, including almost $14 billion in dividends and equivalents and over $73 billion in share repurchases. Before we discuss our December quarter outlook, I'd like to describe a number of changes in our financial reporting that we're implementing as we enter our new fiscal year. First, given the increased importance of our services business, and in order to provide additional transparency to our financial results, we will start reporting revenue as well as cost of sales for both total products and total services beginning this December quarter. Second, also beginning this December quarter, we're adopting the FASB's new standard for revenue recognition. This will not result in any change to our total revenue, but it will impact the way we report the classification of revenue between products and services. In particular, the revenue corresponding to the amortization of the deferred value of bundled services, such as Maps, Siri, and free iCloud services, was previously reported in product revenue. After adopting the new standard, this revenue will now be reported in services revenue. The change in classification between products and services will also apply to the costs that are associated with the delivery of such bundled services. After we file our 10-K, we will post a schedule to our investor relations website showing the reclassification of fiscal 2018 revenue from products to services in connection with the adoption of the new standard. The size of this reclassification amounts to less than 1% of total company revenue. And for clarity, this reclassification was not contemplated in our previously stated goal of doubling our fiscal 16 services revenue by 2020. That goal remains unchanged and excludes the revenue that is now shifting from products to services over that time frame. Third, starting with the December quarter, we will no longer be providing unit sales data for iPhone, iPad, and Mac. As we have stated many times, our objective is to make great products and services that enrich people's lives and to provide an unparalleled customer experience so that our users are highly satisfied, loyal, and engaged. As we accomplish these objectives, strong financial results follow. As demonstrated by our financial performance in recent years, the number of units sold in any 90-day period is not necessarily representative of the underlying strength of our business. Furthermore, a unit of sale is less relevant for us today than it was in the past, given the breadth of our portfolio and the wider sales price dispersion within any given product line. Fourth, starting with the December quarter, we will be renaming the other products category to wearables, home, and accessories to provide a more accurate description of the items that are included in this product category. As we move ahead into the December quarter, I'd like to review our outlook, which includes the types of forward-looking information that Nancy referred to at the beginning of the call. We have the strongest lineup ever as we enter the holiday season, and we expect revenue to be between $89 billion and $93 billion, a new all-time record. This range reflects a number of factors to be considered. First, we consider the effect on Q4 and Q1 of the launch timing of our new iPhones this year versus last year. Second, we expect almost $2 billion of foreign exchange headwinds. Third, we have an unprecedented number of products ramping, and while our ramps are going fairly well, we have uncertainty around supply and demand balance. And fourth, we also face some macroeconomic uncertainty, particularly in emerging markets. We expect gross margin to be between 38 and 38.5%. We expect OPEX to be between $8.7 and $8.8 billion. We expect OI&E to be about $300 million. And we expect the tax rate to be about 16.5% before discrete items. Also, today our board of directors has declared a cash dividend of 73 cents per share of common stock, payable on November 15, 2018, to shareholders of record as of November 12, 2018. With that, I'd like to open the call to questions.
Thank you, Luca. And we'd like to ask that you limit yourself to 2 questions. Operator, may we have the first question, please?
Certainly. Our first question will come from Wamsi Mohan with Bank of America Merrill Lynch.
Yes, thank you. Tim, there has been some real deceleration in some of these emerging markets, partly driven by some concerns around some of the rules the administration is contemplating and partly driven by things that are more specific to China, for instance, like some of the regulations around gaming. So can you talk about how you see the trajectory there for the business and what you think of the initiatives of some companies like Netflix and Fortnite trying to bypass the App Store around subscriptions? And I have a follow-up.
Sure. Great question. Starting with emerging markets, the emerging markets that we're seeing pressure in are markets like Turkey, India, Brazil, Russia. These are markets where currencies have weakened over the recent period. In some cases, that resulted in us raising prices, and those markets are not growing the way we would like to see. To give you a perspective of some detail, our business in India in Q4 was flat. Obviously, we would like to see that be a huge growth. Brazil was down somewhat compared to the previous year. And so I think, or at least the way that I see these, is each one of the emerging markets has a bit of a different story. And I don't see it as some sort of issue that is common between those for the most part. In relation to China specifically, I would not put China in that category. Our business in China was very strong last quarter. We grew 16%, which we're very happy with. iPhone in particular was very strong double-digit growth there. Our other products category was also stronger, in fact, a bit stronger than even the overall company number. The App Store in China, we have seen a slowdown or a moratorium, to be more accurate, on new game approvals. There is a new regulatory setup in China, and things are not moving the way they were moving previously. We did see a few games approved recently, but it's very far below the historic pace. And as you've probably seen, some of the larger companies there that are public have talked about this as they've announced their earnings as well. We don't know exactly when this will, the approvals will sort of return to a normal pace. So I would not want to predict that. I do not view, just for avoidance of doubt here, I don't view that issue has anything to do with the trade-related discussions between the countries. I think that is strictly a domestic issue in China. In terms of larger developers, if you sort of step back and look at the value proposition for people from the App Store, there are two key constituencies in that equation. There's the user and there's the developer. If you start with the user, what the App Store provides people is sort of the best and safest place for users to get apps. And we have a tremendous process and infrastructure around achieving that, and where it is not perfect, we wind up reviewing over 100,000 apps per week between new apps and updates for existing apps, and then work with developers quickly to fix the issues. And we also provide the user a one-payment model for purchasing apps and subscriptions and in-app purchases, et cetera, so that they are not in a position that they have to share their private information across many companies. And so that's sort of the proposition for the user. For the developer, we obviously provide the developers a tremendous amount of developer tools, programs, compilers, languages, of course the operating system, APIs, SDKs, and have a huge developer relations team. And we do a tremendous amount of marketing for developers, including the new Today editorial that we just started in the past few months, personal recommendations, search tools, and so on and so forth. And so if there will be, there's no doubt in my mind, there have already been some large developers that concluded that they could do something on their own. We're fine with that. I think Luca mentioned in his comments that if I look at the largest developer, they make up less than 0.3% of the services revenue. So it's probably good to think about that in that context. And there are millions of apps on the store, obviously, and 30,000 or so subscription apps. And so the subscription business itself is nearly as broad as the App Store itself is. And so that's the value proposition. I think that the vast majority of people are very happy with it, and including the most important people at all, which is the user.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that response. If I could just ask you really quick on Apple's role in healthcare. It's been growing significantly since the early introduction in the watch, and then the various kits for developers, including HealthKit, CareKit, et cetera. And when you combine that with your very staunch advocacy for privacy, I see Apple could become a really large disintermediating force in all the friction in the healthcare industry today, in the way medical information is shared and distributed. Is this the way that you see the future for Apple in healthcare, and do you see a means to also grow your services business through the healthcare offerings that could become subscriptions to your customers? Thank you.
I think Apple has a huge opportunity in health, and you can see from our past several years that we have a intense interest in the space and are adding products and services, non-monetized services, so far to that. And I don't want to talk about the future because I don't want to give away what we're doing. But this is an area of major interest to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Wamsi. Could we have the next question, please?
Shannon Cross from Cross Research has the next question.
Thank you very much for taking the question. Given the $4 billion range in revenue that you're giving for the quarter and all of the, all the things that are going on in the world right now, can you maybe give a little detail about the variables that you took into account when you were, coming up with this, geopolitical, trade, macro, component costs? I don't know if you can just give us some ideas of what the puts and takes were. Thank you.
Yes, Shannon, I'll take this one. And at the revenue level, we started from the fact that we are very, very excited about the lineup of products and services that we have getting into the holiday season. It's the strongest lineup that we've ever had. And our guidance range, by the way, represents a new all-time quarterly revenue record, right? As I explained in my prepared remarks, there are a number of things that need to be considered as part of this guidance range, right? The first one is the fact that the launch timing of the new iPhones this year is essentially in reverse order versus last year. And that has had an effect on Q1 and on Q4, and will have an effect on Q1. Last year, we launched the top end of our iPhone lineup, which was iPhone 10, during Q1, and placed the entirety of the channel fill for iPhone 10 in Q1. This year, we launched the top end of the lineup, which is the XS and the XS Max, during Q4. Obviously, this resulted in a more pronounced ASP growth in Q4 of 18, and obviously a tougher compare for Q1. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as you look at the revenue guidance that we provided. The second point that needs to be kept in mind, it is a fact of life, and we've dealt with it for a number of years now, is the fact that when I look at currencies around the world, virtually every foreign currency has depreciated against the US dollar in the last 12 months. And when we look at the impact of foreign exchange on our revenue for the December quarter, we're looking at 200 basis points of headwinds, which translates, given the size of our business, to almost $2 billion of headwind to our revenue. The third point that I think it's important to keep in mind, and Tim has talked about this, we are launching In the last 6 weeks, we've launched an unprecedented number of new products. They're all ramping right now. The ramps are going fairly well, but obviously we have some uncertainty around supply-demand balance for some of these products. And then finally, the last point that we've taken into account is what Tim's talked about in terms of some level of uncertainty at the macroeconomic level in some emerging markets where clearly consumer confidence is not as high as it was 12 months ago. So take that into account, and that's how we got to the range.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the pullback in terms of guidance from a unit perspective. I understand you don't want to give guidance because 90 days is a short period of time, and it can be fluctuate. But what kind of qualitative commentary do you think you'll be able to provide? Because it's obviously investors have spent the last however many years going P times Q. So how should we think about what we can expect and sort of how are you going to manage this process as we go through? I know it's all our job to forecast, but
yeah, let me walk you through the rationale that we've used, and then I'll talk about this qualitative commentary that you were mentioning. As I said, right, our objective is to make great products, provide the best customer experience, and get our customers satisfied, engaged, and loyal to our ecosystem. When you look at our financial performance in recent years, take the last 3 years, for example, the number of units sold during any quarter has not been necessarily representative of the underlying strength of our business. If you look at our revenue during the last 3 years, if you look at our net income during the last 3 years, if you look at our stock price during the last 3 years, there's no correlation to the units sold in any given period. As you know very well, in addition, our product ranges for all the major product categories have become wider over time, and therefore a unit of sale is less relevant for us at this point compared to the past, because we got this much wider sales price dispersion. So unit of sale per se becomes less relevant. As I know you're aware, by the way, our top competitors in smartphones, in tablets, in computers do not provide quarterly unit sales information either. But of course, we understand that this is something of interest, and when we believe that providing qualitative commentary on unit sales offers additional relevant information to investors, we will do so.
Let me make one additional point there just for clarity is that, Shannon, our intention is to continue to give revenue guidance at the company level and gross margin guidance and the other categories that we've been providing. And so our guidance isn't changing. It's the actual report that changes.
Thank you, Shannon. Could we have the next question, please?
Our next question comes from Mike Olson with Piper Jaffray.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon. With the staggered iPhone launch, were you able to discern any impact on the XS and XS Max from buyers potentially waiting for the XR? And what, if anything, can we take away from the December quarter guidance related to what you're seeing for early demand of the XR? And then I have a follow-up. Thanks.
Mike, it's Tim. The XS and XS Max got off to a really great start. We've only been selling for a few weeks. The XR, we've only got out there for, I guess, five days or so at this point. And so that it's, we have very, very little data there. Usually there is some amount of wait until a product shows up, another product shows up and look. But in looking at the data on the sales data for XS and XS Max, there's not obvious evidence of that in the data as I see it.
Got it. And you mentioned record levels for various components of the services business. As we look forward, if growth of services is to maintain something close to the recent pace, what are the components of services that you're particularly excited about that could drive that and be the strongest drivers? And maybe an offshoot to that, it seems like the news flow around augmented reality slowed a little bit in recent months. Is that potentially a materially contributor to services in the near future? Thanks.
Mike, as we said, during the September quarter, we set new records for many services categories, right? From Apple Music to cloud services to the App Store to Apple Care, and Apple Pay really has an exponential trajectory right now. When we look at our services business, we think about the fact that we have a very large and growing installed base. The installed base of all our major product categories is at an all-time high and has been growing over the last several quarters. So the opportunity for us to monetize our services business continues to grow over time. Of course, we are also improving the quality of the services that we provide. And if you look back during the last 3 years, we've added new services to our portfolio. We added Apple Pay, we added Apple Music, we added this advertising business on our App Store. And clearly, we will want to continue to offer new services over time. So there are a number of vectors that allow us to continue to grow the business over time. We have stated that we want to double the size of the services business from the level that we had in fiscal 16 by 2020. We are well on pace to achieve that, and we feel very confident about the future of and the opportunities that we have in the services space.
But Mike, in terms of your question on AR, I have a different view than you do on this one. We just a year ago, practically a year ago, we came out with ARKit 1. 6 months or so after that, we came out with 1.5. We then recently came out with ARKit 2. The number of things that you can do are growing significantly. The number of developers that either have done something or, even more the case, that are working on things that I've seen are growing tremendously. There's a lot of interest out there. And the number of categories that I'm seeing, from gaming to shopping to, I was in China a few weeks ago and saw AR in an art sense, an art exhibit. I was in Berlin last week and saw it being used in a historical, educational kind of sense. I'm seeing it sort of everywhere I go now, and so I think we are in the early days, and it'll keep getting better and better. But I'm really happy with where things are at the moment.
Thank you, Mike. Could we have the next question, please?
Next, we'll go to Katy Huberty with Morgan Stanley.
Thank you, Tim. Given the current trade negotiations and broader geopolitical risk, do you have any plans to consider diversifying the supply chain? And if you were to do that, either on your own or sort of forced, do you think it would have significant impact on the business or profitability?
Katie, if you look at the products that we have created and are manufacturing, they're really manufactured everywhere. We have significant content from the U.S. market. We have content from Japan to Korea to many countries, and we have great content from China as well. And so there are many hands in the products. The vast majority, or almost all, of the R&D is in the United States, as well as a lot of the support organizations. And so as I think that basic model, where you look around the world and find the best different areas. I don't expect that model to go out of style, so to speak. I think there's a reason why things have developed in that way, and I think it's great for all countries and citizens of countries that are involved in that. And I'm still of the mindset that I feel very optimistic and positive that the discussions that are going will be fruitful. These relationships, these trade relationships, are big and complex, and they clearly do need a level of focus and a level of updating and modernization. And so I'm optimistic that the countries, the U.S. and China, and the U.S. and Europe and so forth, can work these things out and for the benefit of everyone.
That's helpful color. And Luca, as a follow-up, NAND prices fell significantly during the September quarter. Why aren't we seeing that flow through to margin expansion for the overall company?
You're referring to the guidance that we provided for Q1, I imagine. And
yes.
Let me give you the puts and takes, Katie. You're correct. We are going to be getting some benefits from commodities in general and memory in particular. Memory on a sequential basis is about 30 basis points favorable for us going into the December quarter. And obviously we're going to be benefiting from the leverage, which is typical of our seasonality in the December quarter. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, currencies have weakened against the US dollar, and the impact that we expect at the gross margin level from foreign exchange is a 90 basis points headwind sequentially. And of course, at this point in the cycle, we also have higher cost structures because, as I said, we've launched so many new products in the last 6 weeks. So those are the puts and takes: leverage and commodity savings on one side, and FX and the new products on the other side.
Thank you, Katie. Could we have the next question, please?
Next, we'll go to Jim Suva with Citigroup.
Thank you very much. A question for Tim and a question for Luca, and I'll ask them at the same time so you can decide who wants to go first or second. But operationally, Tim, I think your company is at a disadvantage relative to others in India, given where items are produced versus shipped versus taxed versus installed, as well as ability to own stores. So can you help us, address that? Is India going to potentially be a big area? As I think you got about only 1% market share, but it sounded like things maybe softened there. And then for Luca, there'll probably be a lot of pushback about not giving iPhone unit data. It sounds like you're still going to give revenue data, if I heard that correctly. But, some people may fear that this now means that the iPhone units are going to start going negative year over year. Because, it's easy to talk about great things and, not show the details of things that aren't so great. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, I'll start with India. We've had really great productive discussions with the Indian government, and I fully expect that at some point they will agree to allow us to bring our stores into the country. We've been in discussions with them, and the discussions are going quite well. There is, as you point out, there are import duties in some or most of the product categories that we're in. In some cases, they compound, and this is an area that we're giving lots of feedback on. We do manufacture some of the entry iPhones in India, and that project has gone well. I am a big believer in India. I am very bullish on the country and the people and our ability to do well there. The currency weakness has been part of our challenge there, as you can tell from just looking at the currency trends. But I sort of view these as speed bumps along a very long journey, though, and that the long term I think is very, very strong there. There's a huge number of people that will move into the middle class. The government has really focused on reform in a major way and made some very bold moves, and I applaud them for doing that, and sort of can't wait for the future there.
And Jim, let me take the question on units. First of all, as Tim said, our approach to guidance, providing guidance doesn't change at all. We continue to provide the same metrics that we were providing before. In terms of reporting results, one of the things that we are doing, and it's new, and it's an addition to the information that we provide to investors, because we've heard some significant level of interest around this, is starting with the December quarter. For the first time, we're going to be providing information on revenue and cost of sales, and therefore gross margins for both products and services. And this will be the first time that we're going to provide gross margin information for our services business, which we believe it is an important metric for our investors to follow. I've given the rationale on why we do not believe that providing unit sales is particularly relevant for our company at this point. I can reassure you that it is our objective to grow unit sales for every product category that we have. But as I said earlier, a unit of sale is less relevant today than it was in the past. To give you an example, the unit sales of iPhone at the top end of the line have been very strong during the September quarter. And that's very important because we're attracting customers to the most recent technologies and features and innovation that we bring into the lineup. But you don't necessarily see that in the number that is reported. And so therefore, we will, as I said, we will provide qualitative commentary when it is important and relevant. But at the end of the day, we make our decisions to, from a financial standpoint, to try and optimize our revenue and our gross margin dollars. And that we think is, the focus that is in the best interest of our investors.
Jim, let me just add a couple things to that for color. Our installed base is growing at double digit. And so there's no, and that's probably a much more significant metric for us from a ecosystem point of view and the customer loyalty, et cetera. The second thing is this is a little bit like if you go to the market and you push your cart up to the cashier, and she says or he says, how many units you have in there? It's sort of it doesn't matter a lot how many units there are in there in terms of the overall value of what's in the cart.
Thank you, Jim. A replay of today's call will be a
couple things to that.
But you don't necessarily see that in the number that is reported. And so therefore, we will, as I said, we will provide qualitative commentary when it is important and relevant. But at the end of the day, we make our decisions to, from a financial standpoint, to try and optimize our revenue and our gross margin dollars. And that we think is, the focus that is in the best interest of our investors.
Jim, let me just add a couple things to that for color. Our installed base is growing at double digit. And so there's no, and that's probably a much more significant metric for us from a ecosystem point of view and the customer loyalty, et cetera. The second thing is this is a little bit like if you go to the market and you push your cart up to the cashier, and she says or he says how many units you have in there. It's sort of it doesn't matter a lot how many units there are in there in terms of the overall value of what's in the cart.
Thank you, Jim. A replay of today's call will be available for 2 weeks on Apple Podcasts, as a webcast on apple.com/investor and via telephone. And the numbers for the telephone replay are 888-203-1112 or 719-457-0820. And please enter confirmation code 3699080. These replays will be available by approximately 5 p.m. Pacific time today. Members of the press with additional questions can contact Kristen Huguet at 408-974-2414, and financial analysts can contact Matt Blake or me with additional questions. Matt is at 408-974-7406, and I'm at 408-974-5420. Thanks again for joining.
This fight this late into election night, guys.
Jared, thanks very much. And I don't think O'Rourke ever led in the polls there, did he? He kept within
maybe one toward the end.
Well, I don't remember a single poll that actually had him in the lead.
He was single digits.
Single digits the whole time. I could tell you that by the weekend they sort of admitted that it had shrunk below 5 points.
Who admitted? Ted Cruz's
Republican
campaign
side had admitted that it had shrunk under 5 points. But after we saw the primary, the Texas primary, where Democrats surged, and yet we're still 500,000 votes fewer that participate in Democratic primary than the Republican primary. You thought, boy, the numbers just aren't there to get over the top, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I mean,
Beto O'Rourke's making it a race.
A lot of us have underestimated him the whole way, but that was the whole point of his race.
But it was, in many ways, a national race, and there were concerns of whether all that money, all that outside money would play in Texas.
Well, except he raised it on his own, and he did try to keep it Texas. I mean, look, the National Democrats sort of stayed away out of, like, they figured what good were they going to do? It's expensive anyway, and he didn't need the money. I mean, he raised more money than I think any presidential candidate in history in a primary campaign other than people named Obama and Clinton. I mean, it's an astronomical amount of money that he raised for a U.S. Senate race. who isn't personally wealthy.
All right, we got to take a break right here. As we go to break, we want to show you our House meter. And right now, NBC News projecting an 80% chance that Democrats reach that magic number of 23 and take control of the United States House of Representatives. We're back after this.
All right, as we watch those results trickle in for the U.S. midterm elections, let's get you up to speed on the markets out here in Asia. These are the markets that are up and running now, and we're not seeing a vastly different picture to what we told you about around about half an hour ago. We are still seeing downside for the Shanghai Composite. We're now down by 0.25%. The Kiwi market is also tracking lower. But we are seeing very strong gains for some of the other markets, like the Nikkei in Japan, which is tracking higher by 1.2%. Australia is gaining some ground as well, as is the TAIEX and Korea. But these aren't huge moves because we, as yet, of course, are still waiting for those US midterm results to filter on through. A couple of points to tell you about in Japan. Those markets are now in the lunch break, bringing up the Nikkei 225 in more detail, and the dollar yen, of course, 113.57 is where we're at right now. We're at a 2-week high for the Nikkei, up by 1.2%, 272 points. In terms of the winners and the losers in Japan, Telco, NTT, jumping up by almost 6% right now. The company saying it would buy back up to 150 billion of its own shares. The other winners you can see there on the board. In terms of the downside for Japan, we've got Mitsubishi Materials falling. It cut its net profit forecast to 25 billion yen from 35 billion yen for the year ending in March. Olympus Corp tumbling too after it's cut its net profit outlook for the year through March to 26 billion yen from 40 billion yen. Now, in Japan, we also had a 0.4% drop coming through in real wages this morning. That was a drop in the month of September. It was the second straight month in a row. Worrying for the BOJ. It is, of course, counting on wage growth to push up its inflation numbers. More detailed look in South Korea. Stocks gaining right now. We're seeing the Kospi up by 1/3%. Bond yields in South Korea are looking like this. We've got some upside coming through in the yield progress for the 3, the 5 and the 10. We've got shares of securities firms in Seoul in the green as the country's Financial Services Commission chairman said it's about time to consider abolishing the market securities transaction tax. Under the current law, there is a 0.15% tax per transaction on the benchmark Kospi market. Well, that's what the markets are looking like out here in Asia. Now let's get back to our NBC News special.
Welcome back. We're joined again by Tom Brokaw. Let's talk for a moment. The probability seems to be increasing that Democrats will take control of the House. The probability seems to be increasing that the Senate will stay in the hands of Republicans. Tell us what divided government is going to look like and how different it'll look from what we've seen for the last 2 years.
It's going to look ugly.
You have all night.
It's going to look ugly. And because, we are 2 years away from a presidential election. There's a lot of feeling that we need to get even with these guys on the Democratic side talking about the Republicans. Republicans are saying Democrats are totally out of sync with the country and its values and what they stand for. So it's going to be tough. And you've got to remember there are a couple of things that are going on. One is that there is a presidential election coming up in 2 years, and given the pace of campaigns these days, they start immediately. And people are going to be raising money and figuring it out and what to do. I think the Democrats have to figure out who they are at this point. The fact is that Donald Trump, campaigning the way he did, holding his message as securely as he did, has a crowd of people out there who will follow him over a cliff if necessary.
Well, could you argue that he has already been campaigning, that these rallies we've watched over the last several weeks, while they are ostensibly on behalf of Republican candidates, he continually said it's about me?
Well, his whole life is about him. I mean, that's how he won, and he's willing to risk that, and it was a big risk on his part. I'm going to make myself the issue here. And he did, and I've been out there in the West talking to people who believe in him, and there is no kind of give whatsoever. They think he's our guy, and he's helped by the economy at this point. So we are in for a divided time for the next couple of years at least, and then hovering over all this, as I said earlier, is the special prosecutor. We don't know what Robert Mueller is going to have to say.
To your point, Tom, if there's a battle for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party now and who it is, does that battle essentially take place in the presidential primary? And what does that mean for its prospects of winning back the White House?
Well, it means that there's going to be a lot of people who think they ought to be the next president of the United States on the Democratic side, and they will be divided along the many parts. Look, if Beto O'Rourke pulls this off tonight, we don't know whether he will or not, he'll automatically go to the top of a tier of some kind. It's Texas. He's been a very appealing guy, but there will be a lot of people. There has been no effort on the part of Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, for that matter, to pull the Democratic Party together at some retreat and saying, we got to get our act together here, folks, and we understand that we're a part of this. We've lost 3 elections in a row, and now it's time for us to step aside and have new leadership. They're not inclined to do that. They think that they can lead them to the promised land.
But, Tom, let me tell you something here. If this is a narrow House majority for the Democrats, if they, say, pick up somewhere north of 23 but less than 35, I don't think it's a given she's Speaker. I think that changes the equation in the House for the very reason you just said. You're going to have the people that got there saying, hey,
And in the Senate, you already have half a dozen people who think they should be president and are going to be candidates. So they're going to be all fighting amongst themselves. It's easier to keep track of who doesn't think they should be president. It's a smaller number. Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting because there have been House races, and granted they're happening in districts that are conservative, where the Democratic candidate has said, I'm not going to support Nancy Pelosi. And so it is somewhat of a question whether or not she remains Speaker.
Here's what's interesting. Democrats had were pretty evenly divided about those that wanted to run to the left and those that wanted to run away from their party leaders. The Republicans, most of them ran with Trump. Very few of them ran away from him. Interestingly enough, the ones that ran away, they're losing right now, too.
Yeah, and we'll hear that from him tomorrow.
Yes,
I promise you.
Carlos Cabello, if he gets this.
The fact is, he took a big risk in how it is who he is. I mean, the whole world is about Donald Trump, but he put himself out there, and he went from rally to rally to rally, and we'll hear a lot about that tomorrow, and we are a
maybe
country,
tonight on Twitter.
The next 2 years, but let me leave you with this, the old Brokaw line. In the next 2 years, UFO. The unforeseen will occur. We don't know what that is, but something will happen to disrupt this in one form or another for the Democrats or the Republicans.
All right, we're going to take a break. We will be back with more of our election 2018 coverage on NBC after this.
Let's get a look at how the markets in Asia are holding up as we're waiting for these results to, of course, continue trickle in when it comes to the U.S. midterms. Let's bring up the boards. We're seeing a very slow picture out here in Asia. There's not a huge amount of movements in the market. A lot of green on the boards, of course, but we're holding fairly steady. The Nikkei 225 up by 1.25%. We've got the Aussie market tracking higher, but only now up by 1%, so we've lost some of that earlier positive territory. The Greater China region market's looking a little bit mixed right now. Let's get out to Emily for more on that. Ems.
Thanks a lot, Oriel. And closing in on 90 minutes of trade for the Greater China markets, and very much watching what's happening stateside with this U.S. midterm election, because what happens over there, whether or not Trump is able to hold on to his position in the House and the Senate, will mean how the trade war with China continues to play out. Whether he will be emboldened with basically keeping the House and the Senate with the GOP. So we are keeping track of what's happening in the markets here. Shanghai with a slight negative bias, down 2 points. Shenzhen better for 2 points. The Hang Seng Index better for 30 points, 26,150. And the Hong Kong H shares up 0.1%. The election outcome very much felt here in Hong Kong as well as China, because if we have a prolonged trade war, this will have impact on the Chinese economy. 60% of the Hong Kong listed stocks are linked to China, so there will be a spillover effect into the Hong Kong market. Pull up the trade proxies. We're looking at the likes of WH Group. This is the world's largest pork producer, and Li & Fung. This is a supply chain manager. Li & Fung shares seeing very strong gains this morning, up almost 7% at $1.70. WH Group, not too bad, outperforming as well, up 1.7%, last traded at $5.96. Now, all this comes ahead ahead of the big release of trade data coming out tomorrow, where the number is expected to expand at a healthy clip, with a lot of these companies front-loading ahead of the January 1st hike in tariffs. So this is something definitely we are going to be watching very closely as the results trickle in. That's how the markets here are shaping up. Let's get back to our NBC News special.
Chuck invited me over to the board. We have a big call to make. This was a battleground. Sharice Davids, elected Democrat in Kansas, first Native American woman to be elected to the Congress, correct?
And a former MMA fighter. I mean, this was early on. This is knocking off a Republican incumbent, which are always much harder than winning open seats here. She just was she ran a very aggressive campaign, very frankly, just ran as an unapologetic Democrat, even while, you know, she walked the line of being a progressive and a moderate in that district. So and that's a big win for her, and she's going to be a quick rising star in the Democratic.
All right, let's go do our map, our House meter then, because I think we are now, according to the NBC decision desk, going to say it's an 85% chance now with that pickup that the Democrats take control of the House.
Magic number there.
Yes,
okay, let's look at that.
Okay, yeah. So inside the numbers, how do we get to that sense of confidence, 85%, that the Democrats are going to get the House?
And you want to know why? Because we just flipped a new race.
Oh.
As you were talking, New Jersey 11, we just officially called that one. So that is why. New Jersey's starting to come in.
Yeah.
Those VA races, Democrats lead, almost all is reporting.
Yeah.
As you can see, we're about to see a whole bunch of races flip.
And it's 90% confidence now that the Democrats retake the House.
All right, as we are watching those results trickle in for the U.S. midterm elections, let's get you up to speed on the markets. The Asian markets are looking like this right now. The Australian market has just turned into the red as we are speaking. Let's get some more detail on this with Matthew Taylor. Matt, good morning.
Hi there, Oriel. Yeah, the Australian market, it's been fairly tentative throughout most of the trading session today. It's pretty much sitting on the flat line, and that's exactly where we find ourselves now. Last time we checked in, we did have gains of around about 1/3 of 1%, but the Australian market now just down by about 1 point or so. CBA is one stock that we are watching today. In terms of news flow, pretty light on the menu here in Australia today, but CBA revealing that its Q1 cash profit was down by 5.7%, pressured by higher funding costs, which impacted margins. That Q1 unaudited profit number coming in at $2.5 billion, impaired assets rising to $6.6 billion from $6.1 billion. Let's give you a look at how some of the other banking stocks are performing today. We are seeing some gains across this sector, but resources stocks weakening on the Australian market today, and that's dragging down the overall index. The likes of BHP off by about 1%, South 32 trading down by about 1.5%. Oriel, back to you.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much for that update. Let's get a little bit more detail on how the Japanese markets are holding up. The Nikkei 225 dipped into the red at one point, but it's now up by 1.25%, a 2-week high. The dollar yen is sitting at 113.49. Telecom giant NTT jumping. The company saying it would buy back up to 150 billion of its own shares. As for the losers, the downside right now in Japan, Mitsubishi Materials is among them, falling after it's cut its net profit forecast to 25 billion yen from 35 billion yen for the year ending in March. Olympus Corp tumbling too after it's cut its net profit outlook for the year through March to 26 billion yen from 40 billion yen. Let's get a little bit more detail on what's happening in the South Korean markets today. Stocks are gaining as those midterm election results stateside trickle in, but only by 1/3%. We're also watching the bond yields in South Korea, and which are tracking higher at the moment for the 3, the 5 and the 10. Securities firms in Seoul, let's bring up those and see how we're holding up. Also very much in the green, in fact gains of more than 3% for South Korean brokerages. These gains are coming as the country's Financial Services Commission chairman said it's about time to consider abolishing the market securities transaction tax. Under the current law, there's a 0.15% tax per transaction transaction on the benchmark Kospi market. Looking ahead now to the open on Wall Street. Again, we're waiting for these midterm results to continue to come through. This is what the US futures markets are looking like right now, and it does look like we are going to see a strong open to Wall Street later on. Of course, there's still some time to go when it comes to these US midterm results that we're watching filter through, but also some time to go before the US markets opens post those results. In terms of the Forex markets, we're also seeing some movement across the boards there. We've got now the euro tracking higher once again. It's been a bit of a volatile couple of hours for the euro, but we are now back in the green. The sterling, a similar mark. We're also tracking higher at 131.08. CAD sitting slightly higher, and we've got the dollar index holding fairly steady this morning, coming through at just above the 96 level.
From NBC News, the vote, America's future. Here's Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie.
Welcome back. 10 o'clock in the East, and things beginning to move quickly the Democrats' way in the House.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the House meter. No, just to set the stage, they needed 23 for the Democrats to get control of the House. The Senate, they needed 2, but they are going in the wrong direction for the Senate as far as the Democrats are concerned. But look at that. 10 pickups, which means they just need 13 more if they want to get control of the House. This is one of the races that just got called. This is a pickup. Mikey Sherrill, a veteran, she picks it up in New Jersey 11. There's a 90% chance now that the Democrats do, in fact, take the House. And as I just showed you, yes, this is the race that Chuck and I just called.
We called that. I was just going to say it flipped while we were talking.
It sure did.
And in the New York 11, that's a Democratic gain. Max Rose, the projected winner there.
Staten Island with a Democrat in the age of Trump is a bit shocking, but this was a really well-run race.
Another bellwether right here, Lester.
Yeah, this is the Virginia 2. This is Elaine Loria.
We pointed it out early in the night. This was Virginia 2. That's a Republican incumbent losing there. We had said that was the swingiest of the races on the East Coast, and it tips down.
Go out west. Too early to call Montana's Senate race. This one could come down to the wire. And in Nevada, again, too early to call. Jackie Rosen, the Democrat, former synagogue president, up against Dean Heller, the incumbent.
Texas Senate, we will keep going back to this showdown here. Too early to call.
Can I just tell you, we're going to tell our boiler room guys, with 76% in, we can change the call. It's too close to call at this point. Let's stop calling it too early to call. You have that much vote in, I think we can fairly say.
Chuck's putting his order in like it's a fast food restaurant. All right, Florida Senate, too close to call at this hour. Utah Senate, this is not a surprise. Mitt Romney, perhaps you've heard that name before, former presidential candidate, is now going to the United States Senate.
All right, Kansas governor. It looks like this is a Democratic pickup. Laura Kelly wins over Chris Kobach.
That is a big deal because Chris Kobach was the leader of that ill-fated voter fraud commission. They never had a meeting. They never found any fraud. Very close to the president. The president campaigned for him. Chris Kobach going down in Kansas.
By the way, that worked almost a whole bunch of moderate Republicans endorsed the Democratic candidate in that race. A whole bunch. It's very similar to almost how Kathleen Sebelius got to the governorship the last time they elected a Democrat.
Did President Trump, I think I'm right, did he pick Chris Kobach in the primary?
He did.
Yeah, finger on the scale.
But he never went back. He didn't go back and campaign for him late. I wonder if Chris Kobach's a little upset about it.
We've got some more to show you. We can look at the Iowa governor. That race is too early to call right now. The Republican incumbent there.
All right, Nevada's governor, too early to call. We've got an interesting race there. We've got the grandson of a governor there. Georgia's governor.
Son of a former senator.
And the son of a former senator, yes, indeed. Little scandal there, so Chuck, we won't get into all that. Georgia governor, too early to call. And here's a big one in the Midwest.
Wisconsin governor, too early to call. Scott Walker, the incumbent, trying to fend off a challenge by Tony Evers. But again, too early to call there.
We've got a call to make in Vermont, and the Republican Phil Scott wins handily over Christine Hallquist, who would have been the first transgender governor of Vermont, but it's the Republican who holds on there, the incumbent.
Yeah, this race for the Democrats to gain control of the House is the drama, one of the dramas of the night. Of course, one of the big ones, and this is the the NBC News projection. The meter saying there's now a 95% chance that the Democrats will
As you guys
achieve
were
their
flipping
goal.
boards, we literally had 2 more Pennsylvania races went from red to blue. Those redrawn districts, Pennsylvania's 6th, Pennsylvania's 7th. Both were open seats. These were the expectations that Democrats would do well here. But this is why we're up to 95% confidence. These East Coast seats are starting to fall. We're starting to call them. I have to say the Dan Donovan one is a big deal in
New York.
In Staten Island. But it may portend to a
And
bigger
Chrissy
night.
Houlihan is a really strong candidate. She was dominant throughout that race. Do you notice someone has joined us? It's John Heilman, who, of course, is NBC News political analyst. You've been watching these returns come in. What's your take?
Well, I think the thing that Chuck said strikes me as right. There was a little bit of people getting a little nervous there on the Democratic side when some of these toss-up races and races the Democrats expected to get in the House didn't come quickly enough from their point of view. And now they're starting to come through. You're seeing them, we're calling them like every 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. You think about all of those places that we focused on all year long that are still out there. All those Clinton-won California districts that are potential, if not likely, pickups for Democrats. You think about Iowa, where I was out in Iowa on Sunday, and Ann Selzer is looking at 4 Iowa congressional districts, all Republican currently, and she thinks 3 of the 4 are going to go Democratic, and the only one that's really a question is the Steve King race, which is also not outside the possibility of getting flipped over.
So you're suggesting Democrats, so this could be big.
So there's still a lot of seats out there as we move west that Democrats expect to get, and as these ones that they expected and hoped to get and were in nervousness about an hour ago are all falling their way right now, it could be not a vast Democratic wave in the House, but a pretty substantial
Well, let me
majority.
put you on the spot a little bit, and Chuck, you can chime in too. Can you think of a race tonight that was really fought in a conservative stronghold where Democrats came in big with the candidate and money and were competitive in a district that otherwise one wouldn't expect them to be in? Have there been any big upsets tonight? Well, you mentioned Staten Island.
I think Staten Island's the biggest upset so far.
But people talked about Amy McGrath in Kentucky. She couldn't make it happen.
But in fairness to Dan Donovan, it is tough running as a Republican in a congressional race when the top of your ticket's getting clobbered. Okay, and it wasn't as competitive a governor's race. And look, this has been the problem for these Pennsylvania Republicans, too. All these seats have gone to, there was no competitive statewide.
And Max Rose is military also, which is very appealing. He's a weekend warrior. He's in the National Guard. Tours of duties overseas. He's a very appealing guy. One of the trends in the congressional races this year, so many military veterans, and not of any particular party. We've got some who are Democrats, some are Republicans, but won't it be great to have people who've served our country in uniform now in the United States Congress?
Break it down, Chuck.
Well, look, I mean, we need the Democrats need 12, right? Look, I can find you 12 on our battleground, just this list here that we're looking at where they lead. There's that Florida 26 race. All the votes are, looks like all but 1% of it, it's in. 3,000 vote lead for the Democrat. Georgia 7, the Democrats lead here with about half the votes. So there's 2 that we know of where the votes still being counted. Virginia 7, that's a, I mean, come on, guys. Let's go. Come on board. Hit me here. Oh, well, sometimes stuff's not working the way you hope to work. Kansas, the other one they were hitting there, Kansas 2, Paul Davis ran for governor the last time, came close. He's ahead there. You go to Maine 2, we got no numbers in from there. So Michigan 6 is one they were hoping for. 7, they're still ahead in. 8 is still, we're waiting to see in, about half the vote in. So the point is, they need 12. They got 3 or 4 in California we haven't even gotten to yet. There's a reason why we're at 95% confidence, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get to 100% confidence before we hit 11 o'clock.
What about margins?
Well, the margins at this point, I think we're looking at somewhere in the, I'm in 30 to 35 range. Yeah. I think we're looking at
gain of 30
a
to
net
35
gain of 30 to 35 seats. You know, they'd have to have a lot of last-minute ballots fall their way to get it closer to 40, but this looks more like 30 to 35.
So then you have this discussion about, is that a wave or not a wave, right? I mean, is that it's not a tsunami, there's no question about it, but it's also not just on the margin of 23,
So many aquatic metaphors going on. Is it a ripple? Is it a puddle?
Too many metaphors, and look, I mean, the other thing, of course, what's going on in the Senate, where you've had already so far tonight, you've had good news and bad news for Democrats. You look at what happened in Indiana. Democrats expected among the endangered Democratic senators in red states. They thought that Indiana was probably going to stay safe, but that race is now turned over, and that's a big problem for
Guys,
them.
I got a call to make, and this will not surprise most political observers. Heidi Heitkamp, the Democratic incumbent, goes down in a deep red state, North Dakota. Kevin Cramer, the congressman, will prevail there, and
that's a bigger deal than just one Senate seat, Savannah.
Well, tell us, Chuck.
That's
tell
number
us.
50.
Okay, number 50 for the
That's
Republicans.
number 50
they get
for the
it back.
Republicans.
Yes.
They will retain control. It's official, even if they lose the rest of the races on the board here. As you can see, whether it's Texas, Arizona, Nevada, they could lose. All 6 of those could go Democratic, and at this point, you would see that Republicans retain because of Mike Pence.
50, and the vice president gets the deciding vote.
Indiana, North Dakota, so the red
And
states
Heidi Heitkamp,
delivered.
She won by 6,000 votes, a lot of them Native Americans last time. Huge controversy over the way the Native Americans were having all kinds of ballot
And her vote on
difficulties
Kavanaugh didn't help her.
And the vote on Kavanaugh was absolutely determinant.
She's one of the most powerful, I think, a certain kind of human story. I spent some time with her just a couple weeks ago, and, she is one of the rare, whatever you want to say about her, she knew that the vote she was going to take on Judge Kavanaugh was likely going to cost her this seat. She was already a little bit behind in that race. She stared it down, and she said, I got to go this way. She made a vote of conscience that was against her own political interest. Again, whatever you think about the merits of the vote, she knew that was the hill that she was likely to die on, and she took the vote anyway.
She was also hurt by a real mess up by her team after the Kavanaugh vote, where they unfortunately disclosed and outed a woman who had several women, in fact, who had been sexually attacked, which went right against what Heitkamp said was her vote of principle. And she needed that Native American vote, and there was that controversy over whether or not a new voter ID law was in fact suppressing the vote of Native Americans.
I'm struck by the numbers behind us, Savannah. Remember we said 23 and 2. This is a case where 23 was lower than 2.
Yes.
Guess what? Now the Senate number went up to 4, right? We've been having a count up. So Democrats now need to find 4. They have Mississippi runoffs and all this stuff. The point is, the number went up. That tells you
I'll say this, though, quickly. Again, when I was out there, we went and looked at went out to Standing Rock. The issue around voter suppression and voter ID in North Dakota is a really serious one. And there are significant questions to ask about whether that law is unfair and discriminatory. However, the margin in that race, it wouldn't really matter. She got clobbered in that race, and there's not enough, at least historically, there's not enough Native American vote under any circumstance to have made up that margin that she just lost by.
Well, let's talk about another Senate race that we're watching carefully. That is the one in Texas right now, Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. Let's go to Gabe Gutierrez at Ted Cruz headquarters. This thing is we still have it listed as too early to call. 78% of the vote in, but Ted Cruz starting to grow a little bit of a margin.
Chuck calls it too close.
It is too close. We're at 78% reporting. Call it too close, Don.
Well, I'm not allowed to do it.
Gabe, he's at headquarters. I know, Chuck's going wild here. What are you hearing, Gabe? What's the mood there?
Hi there, Savannah. Well, the mood here is still celebratory, although many people I've spoken with here wish this race wasn't quite so close at this point. The state GOP says it is still cautiously optimistic, but they're now looking at early results coming in from Harris County, and it shows a surprisingly strong showing from Beto O'Rourke in this county. Of course, this is a very vote-rich county, and if this trend continues, this could be very
Sorry to interrupt you, Gabe, but we've got...
I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but we have a good reason. Ted Cruz has been reelected in Texas. This long shot campaign of Beto O'Rourke that was well-funded and certainly got a lot of notice around the country ultimately did not prevail. Ted Cruz, the incumbent, headed back to the Senate. There will be a lot of stories written, John Heilman, about what happened here, whether he ever had a chance, and whether or not his way, his approach, which was to run to the left, whether that ever was going to work in deep red Texas.
There are so many storylines about this, and again, I keep saying I was just with these people. I was literally at the last rally that Beto O'Rourke did last night in El Paso, and the energy around him was palpable, and we saw it all throughout this race. There is a fundamental reality.
By the way, we've officially called control for the Republicans for the Senate. We got our graphic up there. We want people to see it.
At the current if that race ends up as close as it looks with 79%, he has done something incredible, which is
Greetings and welcome to the Microsoft Fiscal Year 2019 First Quarter Earnings Conference Call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. A question-and-answer session will follow the formal presentation. If anyone should require operator assistance during the conference, please press star 0 on your telephone keypad. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, Mike Spencer, General Manager, Investor Relations. Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. On the call with me are Satya Nadella, Chief Executive Officer, Amy Hood, Chief Financial Officer, Frank Brod, Chief Accounting Officer, and Carolyn France, Deputy General Counsel and Corporate Secretary. On the Microsoft Investor Relations website, you can find our earnings press release and financial summary slide deck, which is intended to supplement our prepared remarks during today's call and provides reconciliation of differences between GAAP and non-GAAP financial measures. All growth comparisons we make on the call today relate to the corresponding period of last year unless otherwise noted. We will also provide growth rates in constant currency when available as a framework for assessing how our underlying business is performed, excluding the effect of foreign currency rate fluctuations. Where growth rates are the same in constant currency, we refer to the growth rate only. We will post our prepared remarks to our website immediately following the call until the complete transcript is available. Today's call is being webcast live and recorded. If you ask a question, it will be included in our live transmission, in the transcript, and in any future use of the recording. You can replay the call and view the transcript on the Microsoft Investor Relations website. During this call, we will be making forward-looking statements, which are predictions, projections, or other statements about future events. These statements are based on current expectations and assumptions that are subject to risks and uncertainties. Actual results could materially differ because of factors discussed in today's earnings press release, in the comments made during this conference call, and in the Risk Factors section of our Form 10-K, Forms 10-Q, and other reports and filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We do not undertake any duty to update any forward-looking statement. And with that, I'll turn the call over to Satya.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to everyone on the phone for joining. We're off to a very strong start in fiscal 19, delivering record revenue and profit. Every organization today needs tech intensity to compete and grow in an increasingly digital world. There are two aspects to this. Think of it as a simple equation. First, every organization needs to be a fast adopter of best-in-class technology. Second, they'll need to build their own proprietary digital capability. Our cloud platforms and tools enable our customers to build tech intensity while ensuring we're addressing their tough questions around trust, both trust in technology and trust that they have a partner whose business model is aligned to their success. No customer wants to be dependent on a provider that sells them technology on one end and competes with them on the other. Getting this equation right is key to their success going forward. Microsoft is uniquely positioned to help. Now I'll briefly highlight how we're innovating across our solution areas. A little over a year ago, we introduced Microsoft 365 to help organizations of all sizes empower their employees in the modern workplace. Today, a multi-billion-dollar business that gives our customers a path to the cloud and broadens our reach with new and underpenetrated markets. Customers from large multinationals like Eli Lilly to Rio Tinto first-line field workers to small businesses are all choosing Microsoft 365. Cybersecurity is a central challenge. Microsoft's security differentiation is based on two things. First, our unparalleled operational security posture. Second, our comprehensive product suite spanning identity, information, application, and device protection. We analyze more than 6.5 trillion signals each day, process 450 billion authentications monthly, and scan 400 billion emails for malware and phishing each month. This massive signals generate insights that fuels security innovations for customers. New capabilities in Microsoft 365 detect, investigate, and remediate sophisticated cybersecurity threats across every endpoint, saving IT professionals thousands of hours. Microsoft Security Score gives organizations a dynamic report card on their security posture. In identity management, Microsoft is already a leader with Azure Active Directory, and we are innovating with new capabilities to eliminate passwords for the hundreds of thousands of Azure AD connected apps that businesses use every day. The future of productivity and collaboration will be defined by AI innovation and new AI-driven features across Microsoft 365, from automated slide design to proactive Cortana reminders to enhanced search experiences and real-time meeting transcription to org analytics, are all augmenting human capability, making it easier for people to focus on what matters most. Another differentiator is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is the only enterprise-grade solution that brings together messaging, video conferencing, meetings, and web-based collab into a single integrated user experience scaffolding. It eliminates the need for discrete single-point solutions that only increase an organization's security and compliance exposure. Customers recognize this value. Teams is now the hub for teamwork for 329,000 organizations, including 87 of the Fortune 100. And we are adding automated translation support for meetings, shift scheduling for first-line workers, and new industry-specific offerings, including healthcare and small business. Windows 10 continues to gain traction in the enterprise as the most secure and productive operating system, and more than half of our commercial device install base is now on Windows 10. Surface continues to set the bar for the industry with 5 new category-leading Surface devices, including the new Surface Go. Microsoft 365 and Surface are inspiring our OEM ecosystems to innovate, and we have the strongest line of devices going into the holiday season. Moving to business applications, AI-powered digital feedback loops that connect products, operations, customers, and employees to create predictive power, automate workflows, and ultimately improve outcomes are key to all organizations. Dynamics 365 uniquely addresses this need. We expect Dynamics to deliver more than $2.5 billion in revenue this year, with half of that total coming from Dynamics 365. And this quarter, we introduced Dynamics 365 AI, a new class of AI applications built for an era where the systems of record and engagement are converted into intelligence. Dynamics 365 Mixed Reality digitizes the physical spaces and interactions. Companies like Chevron and ZF Group are already using it to transform training and design for their first-line workers, and H&M, the world's second largest clothing retailer, is relying on Dynamics 365 to digitize its critical business processes. These customers and others recognize the advantage of our modular, extensible approach over the traditional SaaS model of monolithic suites of siloed apps. And our investments in our analytics and application platform, spanning Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow, are driving momentum with customers and have made us a leader in no-code app building and business analytics in the cloud. Our Open Data Initiative, a strategic partnership with Adobe and SAP, takes this even further, delivering on our vision of one unified data model to provide unparalleled business insight from behavioral, transactional, financial, and operational data. Together, we'll enable data to be exchanged and enriched across systems, making it a renewable resource that enables new intelligent customer experiences. LinkedIn continues to be an essential platform to connect the world's professionals. With sessions growth of 34% year over year and record levels of messages sent and content shared. We're innovating with new experiences that leverage the LinkedIn and Microsoft graphs, such as the ability to email LinkedIn connections directly from Microsoft 365. Strong engagement across the platform is fueling demand for sponsored content in marketing solutions and talent solutions, which saw record job postings again this quarter. Talent Insights is a new self-service analytics solution that gives HR professionals competitive intelligence and labor market trends for an increasingly competitive jobs market. And the pending acquisition of Glint brings employee insights alongside LinkedIn's workforce insights to create a powerful solution to help customers attract, retain, and develop the best talent. Now turning to Azure. Customers from multinationals like Volkswagen, Anheuser-Busch, InBev, MasterCard, to fast-growing startups like Grab are recognizing the architectural advantage of a consistent computing stack from the cloud to the edge. Azure is the only hyperscale cloud that extends to the edge across identity, data, application platform, as well as security and management. We introduced 100 new Azure capabilities this quarter alone, focused on both existing workloads like security and new workloads like IoT and Edge AI. With Azure Confidential Computing, Azure is now the first cloud to provide a secure platform for protecting the confidentiality and the integrity of data while in use, adding to our existing security protections to encrypt data in transit as well as in rest. Every company needs a strategy to take advantage of the billions of IoT devices entering the market each year. Azure Sphere, our end-to-end solution for securing microcontroller-powered devices, is now broadly available and seeing strong customer interest. Azure Digital Twins is a new service that models relationships and interactions across people, places, and devices. We're investing to make Azure the best cloud for enterprise data. Our data services spanning SQL Database, Cosmos DB, Data Warehouse, and Data Lake provide the most comprehensive data platform needed for enterprise data estates. Azure ML builds on this foundation to further democratize data and AI to unlock insights, helping data scientists build and train AI models faster, then deploy them to the cloud or to the edge. Across industries, our customers and partners are using services like these to transform. BMW introduced an agent to redefine how people interact with their cars. Bueller, which processes 65% of the world's grain, is relying on Azure Cognitive Services to improve food safety. Shell is applying AI across its enterprise to optimize dill productivity and keep workers safe. And this week at Sibos conference, the Microsoft Cloud is front and center, powering financial services transformation for organizations such as Swift, which is enabling secure payment transfers on Azure. Finally, our pending acquisition of GitHub, which we expect to close shortly, recognizes the increasingly vital role developers play in value creation and growth across every industry. Bueller, which processes 65% of the world's grain, is relying on Azure Cognitive Services to improve food safety. Shell is applying AI across its enterprise to optimize dill productivity and keep workers safe. And this week at Sibos conference, the Microsoft Cloud is front and center, powering financial services transformation for organizations such as Swift, which is enabling secure payment transfers on Azure. Finally, our pending acquisition of GitHub, which we expect to close shortly, recognizes the increasingly vital role developers play in value creation and growth across every industry. I'm excited about the opportunity to bring our tools and services to new audiences while enabling GitHub to grow and retain its developer-first ethos. Now I'll turn to gaming. We continue to broaden our reach with more than 2 billion gamers worldwide and expand our opportunity. Finally, our pending acquisition of GitHub, which we expect to close shortly, recognizes the increasingly vital role developers play in value creation and growth across every industry. I'm excited about the opportunity to bring our tools and services to new audiences while enabling GitHub to grow and retain its developer-first ethos. Now I'll turn to gaming. We continue to broaden our reach with more than 2 billion gamers worldwide and expand our opportunity, from the way games are distributed to how they are played and viewed. We are investing in content, community, and cloud services across every endpoint to expand usage and deepen engagement. First-party content is key to our approach, and we now have 11 game studios in our portfolio to deliver differentiated content for our fast-growing services like Game Pass. Xbox Live now has 57 million monthly active users, and Mixer usage growth is accelerating. This loyal, high-value community is our strongest asset, creating expanding opportunity for monetization of first and third-party games. Fortnite is a good example of that. And all up, we are seeing record software and services revenue and engagement being driven on our platform. Earlier this month, we announced Project xCloud, a breakthrough game streaming technology that puts gamers at the center of their gaming experience, enabling them to play games in high fidelity wherever and whenever they want on any device. And it'll empower game developers to scale to hundreds of millions of new users across devices. It's early days, but I'm excited about our roadmap. Across our businesses, we are accelerating innovation, picking the right secular trends, investing in large growing markets, many of which are still in their infancy. Additionally, every one of our solutions is reinforcing our core intelligent cloud and intelligent edge platform. Not only are we optimistic about the opportunity for us and for our customers, we also recognize our responsibility. We were one of the first companies in the United States to require suppliers doing substantial business with us to provide paid time off for their employees. And this quarter, we took a further step to ensure that these suppliers also provide their employees with paid parental leave. We're ensuring that our enterprise-class security innovation not only helps our largest customers, but also protects small businesses and consumers who are often the most vulnerable to attacks. Finally, we are putting AI into the hands of change makers to address society's most pressing challenges with initiatives like AI for Humanitarian Action, which supports critical disaster recovery efforts around the world and more. This recognition of our broader responsibility, coupled with our bold innovation, makes me incredibly optimistic about our opportunity ahead. With that, now I'll hand over to Amy, who will cover our financial results in detail and share our outlook, and I look forward to rejoining you for questions.
Thank you, Satya, and good afternoon, everyone. This quarter, revenue was $29.1 billion, up 19% and 18% in constant currency. Gross margin dollars increased 18%. Operating income increased 29% and 28% in constant currency. And earnings per share was $1.14, increasing 36% and 33% in constant currency. Another quarter of double-digit revenue and operating income growth drove a record start to the fiscal year. We saw strength across each of our segments with strong sales execution by our partners and sales teams. Customer demand for our hybrid and cloud offerings drove the quarter, and we continued to benefit from favorable macroeconomic and IT spending trends. Now to our commercial business. As a reminder, starting this quarter, the commercial portion of LinkedIn is included in these metrics. Our commercial revenue annuity mix increased 1 point year over year to 90%. Commercial unearned revenue was $27.3 billion, growing 22% and 21% in constant currency, in line with expectations. On an expiry base that was roughly flat year over year, commercial bookings were better than expected and increased 15% and 16% in constant currency, benefiting from larger, long-term Azure contracts, growth in Azure consumption overages and pay-as-you-go contracts, and strength in on-premises revenue. These contract types impact bookings, reported revenue, and unearned revenue in different ways. Let me explain. First, under ASC 606, hybrid and on-premises offerings drive bookings growth and more in-period revenue recognition. Therefore, there is less impact on unearned revenue. Second, growth in Azure consumption overages and pay-as-you-go contracts drive bookings growth and in-period revenue, but have little impact on unearned revenue. And finally, long-term Azure contracts drive significant bookings growth, but have a smaller impact on in-period revenue and unearned revenue. The inclusion of LinkedIn results was immaterial to the growth rates of commercial unearned and commercial bookings. Commercial cloud revenue was $8.5 billion, growing 47% and 46% in constant currency, with strong performance in the U.S., Western Europe, and the UK. Commercial cloud gross margin percentage increased 4 points to 62%, driven again by significant improvement in Azure gross margin. Company level, gross margin percentage was 66%, down slightly year over year, with sales mix shift to gaming and commercial cloud. FX increased overall company and productivity and business processes revenue by 1 point, in line with guidance. The impact to intelligent cloud and more personal computing revenue was immaterial, 1 point less favorable than expected. FX impact was immaterial to COGS and operating expenses, about 1 point less favorable than expected. Even with that headwind, operating expenses grew 8%, in line with expectations. Our engineering and sales capacity investments in large, growing markets continue to deliver differentiated value for our customers while generating material operating income leverage. This quarter, we increased operating margin nearly 3 points year over year. Now to the segment results. Revenue from productivity and business processes was $9.8 billion, increasing 19% and 18% in constant currency, ahead of expectations, driven by both the on-premises and cloud businesses. Office commercial revenue grew 17% and 16% in constant currency, driven by continued Office 365 commercial growth and approximately 3 points of growth from increased demand ahead of a price increase with the launch of Office 2019. Office 365 commercial revenue grew 36% and 35% in constant currency, with installed base expansion across all customer segments and ARPU growth as customers shift to E3 and E5 workloads. Office 365 commercial seats grew 29% and, in line with last quarter, benefited from strong performance of our Microsoft 365 academic offers. Office consumer revenue increased 16% and 17% in constant currency, driven by growth in Office 365 subscription revenue and approximately 5 points of growth from increased channel demand ahead of a price increase with the launch of Office 2019. Office 365 consumer subscribers grew to 32.5 million. Dynamics revenue grew 20%, including a few points from a greater mix of contracts with higher in-period recognition under ASC 606. Dynamics 365 grew 51% and 49% in constant currency. LinkedIn revenue increased 33%, with strong execution across all businesses. Segment gross margin dollars grew 18% and 17% in constant currency, and gross margin percentage declined slightly year over year as cloud mix offset LinkedIn and Office 365 margin expansion. Operating expenses increased 7% and 8% in constant currency, with ongoing investments in LinkedIn, cloud engineering, and commercial sales capacity to support top-line growth. Operating income increased 29% and 27% in constant currency. Revenue from Intelligent Cloud was $8.6 billion, increasing 24%, better than anticipated, driven by demand for our hybrid offerings. Server products and cloud services revenue grew 28%. Azure revenue increased 76%, in line with our expectations, with strong growth across both consumption and per user-based businesses. Our on-premises server business grew 10% and 9% in constant currency, driven by continued demand for premium versions and hybrid solutions, as well as increased demand ahead of Q2 price increases for certain versions of our server products. Enterprise services revenue grew 6%, as growth in Premier Support Services and Microsoft Consulting Services was partially offset by a decline in custom support agreements for Windows Server 2003. Segment gross margin dollars increased 28% and 27% in constant currency. Gross margin percentage increased year over year as material improvement in Azure gross margin percentage offset the growing mix of Azure IaaS and PaaS revenue.
This was a pickup.
This is one of those suburban seats, suburban Twin Cities.
Yeah, Colorado, the 6th district. It was Jason Crow. That's another Democratic gain.
This one came early in the night. Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and the Republican retired Donna Shalala picks up the seat. Of course, of Clinton administration fame. She was the Health and Human Services Secretary in the early 90s. This was the one that Chuck was so excited about. New York's District 11, Max Rose picks up this seat. Is this our Staten Island seat, Chuck?
This is the Staten Island seat. It's
so
look, in a year where it looks like Trump people are doing okay, you'd think Staten Island one might have stayed Republican.
And Dan Donovan was a former prosecutor who was very controversial for not prosecuting one of those police This is a biggie right here.
Texas 32 it is. Colin Allred, the Democratic gain over Pete Sessions.
For Pete Sessions to lose. I know that the Republicans were worried about that seat.
You know,
longtime congressman.
It is, in fact, the son of a former CIA director, by the way. Pete Sessions held the distinction of running unopposed in 2016 in a district that Hillary Clinton carried. So a whole bunch of Democrats go, whoa, wait. Did we not know that this district was moving? And they finally found a candidate. Look what they got.
Michigan 11, Hallie Stevens. 52%. That's another Democratic gain.
All right, there were a few Virginia races that were going to be bellwethers. This was one of them, and the Democrat took it, Elaine Luria. But there's this one, Virginia's the 7th district, and a lot of folks are watching this one because this was the scene of an absolute political shocker a few years back when Dave Bratt, a Tea Party Republican, unseated the sitting majority leader of the House, Eric Cantor. Well, a few years later, he is in a real tight race right now with Abigail Spanberger, who is a former official of the CIA.
Can't help but wonder that top of the ticket problem for Republicans in the state of Virginia. They had Corey Stewart, who was the Republican nominee, very much more of a Trump guy, didn't connect and got blown out by Tim Kaine. That trickle-down effect, a lot of Republican incumbents were running with a lot of wind in their face because of Corey Stewart. You can't help but wonder, did that cost Dave Bratt $1,000?
Look who's here, Nicole Wallace.
Nicole Wallace.
You want to talk about divided government?
Oh, I've lived divided government. I worked in a Republican White House with the Democratic-controlled House. It changes everything, and I don't know if anyone has explained Donald Trump, not a student of history. I don't know if he understands how much his life changed tonight. Democrats, Adam Schiff is now the chairman of the House Intel Committee. I was reminded today by a former national security official that no one ever passed legislation to protect Robert Mueller. So anyone worried about getting to the bottom of the Russia question now has Democrats in control of the House Intel Committee. And I think, Chuck, you were just saying this with Casey, every tax return, every scandal, and there have been a lot for a White House 2 years in. They've been through more cabinet secretaries, and there have been cabinet secretaries too corrupt for Donald Trump, which is saying something.
And Nicole, I mean, the president, to hear Sarah Sanders talk about it, to hear our White House correspondents, the president's got a little bit of a skip in his step because he's happy to see what happened in the Senate. His big gamble, he went hard in those red states campaigning, and it seems to have paid off on the Senate side.
But that's backward. He went to those races because it was really hard for Republicans to lose control of the Senate.
Ultimately, though, the Republicans prevailed. I guess the question is, does this set up an opportunity for President Trump? He can run against the Democratic House in 2020.
He's going to run against whoever. Donald Trump would run against his pet if he had one. But I think Donald Trump went to the Senate races because he knew the House was out of reach. Donald Trump also hurt a lot of the people he went and campaigned for in the final days. So I think they reverse engineered this, knowing that the Senate was much more gettable than the House. And I think that it is probably a safe bet to say that they don't understand how much their lives changed.
But by keeping control of the Senate, what do they get?
Well, they get, and Donald Trump's legal folks would say this out loud, not on camera and maybe not to their name in newspaper stories, but they avoid impeachment should the House, they avoid conviction should the House ultimately impeach Donald Trump.
Do you think the House would move to impeachment? Nancy Pelosi has been saying it is way too soon, trying to stem the tide of some Democrats who certainly have that fervor. She saw what happened to Newt Gingrich.
I don't think that's their priority, though. No. I mean, I think there are more urgent national security and ethical questions that need to be answered. I think they'll move quickly to sort of pick up where the Republicans shut down the House Intel Committee investigation into Russian meddling. I think they'll get to the country's business before they settle some sort of probably internal debate and political debate about impeachment.
But the message that he is taking from this, that he will take from it, and it was very clear in what Sarah Sanders said, is, why should she, as Hallie Jackson was reporting, why should he call Nancy Pelosi. We're not going to get back to Chuck and Nancy talking about a solution for the Dreamers. He does not feel that he needs to, at least right now, tonight, he doesn't feel he needs to negotiate with the Democratic House. He'd rather run against them.
But that's more about him. He didn't call the people that received pipe bombs either.
Let me just interrupt here. We have a call apparently in the Ohio governor's race. And Mike DeWine, the Republican, is the projected winner of the Ohio governor's race.
This was, first of all, presidential battleground, and the Republicans hang on to the seat. John Kasich was term limited. We'll see if he runs. Democrats really, really wanted.
Oh, they wanted this. Richard Corday, remember the Consumer Financial Protection Board, that new agency that Barack Obama had, and it was sort of created by Elizabeth Warren originally, or conceptualized by her.
He followed her there.
He was the guy, and then they endorsed him for governor. He was early on. I mean, this was a Democratic project from the get-go. Good old Mike DeWine. You know, I
former Attorney General, former Senator.
Yeah, I started covering campaign politics in 1992, and Mike DeWine was running for the United States Senate. Mike DeWine became, I believe, a United States Senator in 94. Lost the Senate seat, I think, to Sherrod Brown. I think at one point, I think he got, and Sherrod Brown's at Senator. Now, Mike DeWine just keeps chugging along.
He's on every bus tour. Any Republican I've ever worked for that goes to Ohio on a bus tour, he's always on the bus.
But he's always wanted to be governor, and he's tried to. He was lieutenant governor. He was attorney general. Always wanted to be governor. Congratulations to Mike DeWine, because the guy has literally half of his adult life has been about getting to the governorship, and the guy finally got there.
Okay, he's taking the bus to the State House, all right? We're going to keep watching these numbers as they roll on in. It's an exciting night here. We'll be back with the next wave of poll closings, top of the hour.
All right, as our U.S. midterm election coverage continues, take a look at market reaction. And for that, take a look at what's happening in Asia. It is up and running and alive at these hours. The picture is pretty positive here. Tokyo, just coming back from the lunch break about 15 minutes ago, is still looking strong, up 188 points, 22,336 and change. The gains in other markets, though, are looking quite a bit more modest. And back, one of the smaller secondary markets, Bangkok, has actually briefly turned negative, as you can see there. Show you currencies very quickly. Let's get to those, shall we? Dollar going into these elections had been fairly well supported, but now it's turned tail. DXY at 96.071, down 0.25%. Dollar yen, same story there, 113 1/3 or so. Although we note the euro, which has been very nicely bid so far this morning, as we follow the midterm elections, is still well supported, 114.42 there. And look ahead to futures, shall we? Still several hours to go yet, but this is the interesting part. Futures implied open compared to fair value seems to be tipping a positive start out of the gates when Wall Street gets back up and running tonight, Asia time. In fact, take a look at the Dow, 113 points implied open, fair value minus 45, so looking strong, although we have to note still early days yet, and a lot potentially could happen between now and, of course, then. I want to talk about what the outcome that we know about so far, that the Democrats are going to control the House, that they've retaken the House, what it means. According to NBC News, they're going to be able to, among other things, control committees, possibly ramp up investigations into the Russian election meddling case into President Donald Trump, and also want to talk about what gridlock means for markets. Here's a look at a graphic from Bank of America Merrill Lynch, BAML, looking back at data all the way back to 1928, in fact. It shows the average annual performance of the S&P 500 based on the balance of power between the executive branch as well as the Congress. And I want to zoom in on that 12% number right there, bottom left-hand corner of the graphic. That is the scenario we are in now. The presidency, Republican, Congress, though, is split. Democrats have retaken the House. The Republicans retained control of Congress. All right, that's a quick look at how markets are shaping up. Let's send it back to NBC News right now for continued U.S. midterm election coverage.
Welcome back, Democracy Plaza. Thank you for joining our 2018 coverage of the election. A lot of big stories we continue to follow. Some of the drama now has been, we've gotten some answers to, but certainly not the Florida Senate race. This one remains very tight, too close to call, 138,000 votes separating the two. Missouri Senate too close to call. Claire McCaskill trailing Josh Hawley. Claire McCaskill, the Democrat, trying to hold on in this district, but too close to call.
I know people are going to look, what's that spread about? Missouri's notorious. Those urban counties come in really late, so you have to wait to see them before you know for sure.
And that would be McCaskill
territory. So you got to wait a little bit to double check. But yes, Hawley. You'd rather be Hawley right now.
All right. Great state of Arizona, my home state. Hi, Mom. And here we have a too close to call race. Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat, Martha McSally, the Republican, and Andrea just pointed out that Martha McSally's old Congress, her seat went to Ann Kirkpatrick, the Democrat. That was a flip. Two members of Congress, Martha McSally, the first woman to fight to become a combat pilot. A jet pilot. I covered that issue with the Pentagon. She fought all the way up to finally Leon Panetta had to let her do it. Let's stay out west. Montana's Senate race, and it is too early to call. Still counting votes in Montana. This is a big matchup there.
Still a bit farther west. We're watching the Nevada Senate race. Too early to call here. Just a little bit of voting in there. Wisconsin governor, it remains too close to call. 4,000 vote difference, 64% in.
Good old Scott Walker.
Scott Walker right now trailing Tony Evers.
Think about this. He got elected in 10 in the Republican wave.
And then the recall, right?
Recall. Re-elected in 14. So it's his fourth statewide campaign in 12 years. The guy knows how to run statewide, but it did seem like that this is going to be his toughest hill yet to climb.
Well, everyone says don't underestimate Scott Walker's organizational skills because he's seen a thing or two. All right, Florida governor still too close to call. Definitely one of the marquee races for the night. 99% of the vote in, but there's that 1% that might make the difference. Same situation in Georgia, except for there we're telling you it is too early to call. We were watching this earlier, and remember we said that our decision desk thought apparently Brian Kemp would exceed the 50% threshold and not have to go to a runoff.
Kemp's number is creeping down. It's been creeping down as vote comes in. The question, and basically a lot of the vote that is late coming in is likely going to lean Abrams. The question is, does it creep down enough below the 50 or not by the time all of it comes in? That's going to be a very, very close. I guess
that's why they call it too early to call. And we're waiting 11 p.m. Eastern poll closings, just about 9 minutes. Can't forget the sunshiny West, and we've got some big races yet to be decided there. What's your big surprise of the night, Nicole?
You know, I think that we were so caught up in the human stories. The Beto candidacy was so exciting. I worked for a lot of Texas Republicans, and you don't see Democrats come that close. And I think, you know, it's surprising to see how close he got. I think the races that we haven't called yet remain some of the more exciting ones, but I think they've obscured the big headline, which is that, as you said when I sat down, we have divided government now. Everything changes. Tomorrow will be the first day of the Trump presidency where another party controls one branch of government. And with Republicans refusing to do any semblance of oversight or any semblance of trying to be any sort of an honest broker with disputes with the Justice Department, FBI, it will be a remarkable change in Washington.
I think what frustrates a lot of people is they watch one particular party in power do things that they complain and complain and complain about, and when you get your shot, do you follow the same playbook, the idea of payback?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, we're all familiar with a lot of the people that will become chairman of the committees. I mentioned Adam Schiff and others. And I think that the Democrats, and you were talking about Nancy Pelosi, I think they realize sort of the gravity of their task. There are a lot of people, 60% of the public doesn't approve of the way Donald Trump is doing his job. The 40% that like him, they love him no matter what. But I think for the 60% of Americans who are uncomfortable with the president, it's very comforting that Democrats now have subpoena power and oversight power.
But the big... Yes, what are the big stories? Look, the Republican Party is Donald Trump's party. This is not Donald Trump. Okay, he may have been hijacking a party, a political party back in 2016 and sort of borrowing it but he has remade it, and he knows how to activate it. I mean, we got caught. Why is Andrew Gillum likely to lose and not win? Why is Stacey Abrams likely to lose and not win? Well, I would argue Donald Trump figured out how to get his base out. It's these rural counties. They show up in big numbers. We're in the middle of a political realignment, so Democrats are going to do well in the suburbs, but it's not enough to win some of these key statewide races.
What this shows is that people want some check. They like checks and balances, and you have to ask yourself, if Paul Ryan, if the Republican leaders, if the Republican chairs had shown any guts and had stood up to Donald Trump, maybe this wouldn't be the result.
And as we go to a break, I understand Virginia 7 has just fallen the Democrats' way. That was when you were watching.
3 of 4 of their targets in Virginia. So we said that'd be a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Abigail Spanberger. All right, we'll take a break. Be back with more right after this.
And for that, we have to bring it back here to Asia because we are up and running. Take a look. Markets are mostly positive. Tokyo back from the lunch break, still leading the way up here. 22,311 and change, up 163 points or so. So off session highs, but still looking pretty strong. Gains in other markets, as you can see, are a fair bit more modest. Bangkok is down about 0.25%, the only market which has turned negative to speak. Let's take a look at Forex, shall we? Dollar is also starting to retrace. DXY down to 96.101. Same story with dollar. Yen 113.25. Just a little bit over that. Euro holding on to gains though. 114.56. In fact, picking up there. This European single currency. Let's swing up to Hong Kong and just check in with Emily Tan for action there. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Martin. And we're keeping track of what's happening in the Hong Kong and China markets. Heading out for the lunch break in the next 5 minutes or so, but we've seen the market continue to gain traction as the results of the U.S. midterm elections continue to roll in. And with the House going blue now, going to the Democrats, some saying that this could mean that President Trump getting some of his power or weakening somewhat with this. And we're continuing to watch the impact on the trade spat with China as well. Shanghai Composite in the morning session up 0.25%. Shenzhen holding on to gains of about 8 points. The Hang Seng Index now up 300 points at the intraday high, with 8 shares now traded better for 1%. Let's take a look at some of those trade proxies like Li and Feng. This is the global supply chain manager and seeing some very nice gains come through today. We're up 6.3%, traded at $1.69. WH Group, which is the world's largest pork producer, also seeing some gains put on in the morning session, up 3%, last done at $6.03. Also being impacted by the trade dispute, Geely Automobile, and this is China's largest automaker. The company seeing declines for 4 consecutive sessions. Today it was down more than 5%, managing to pare some of those losses. Currently down 3.2% at $15.68. Geely Automobile coming out with its latest October sales numbers and showing that it was an increase of 3% on year, but that is significantly slower than the 14% increase in the month of September and the more than 30% increase showed in the month of August. We're seeing analysts say that the company may not be able to meet its full-year target of 1.58 million vehicles. That is a look at Hong Kong and China. Martin, it's back to you.
Okay, thanks, Emily Tan in Hong Kong. Let's take a look at U.S. futures now. Still several hours to go, yet early days, but for what it's worth, take a look. We have futures tipping what looks to be a positive start out of the gate for U.S. markets, but Wall Street gets back up and running tonight, Asia time. And quickly, I want to show you commodities as well. Here's the price action. Is down about 0.1%. A lot more coverage. Get on to CNBC.com. Now back to NBC for U.S. midterm election coverage.
Breaking news as we come on, Andrew Gillum, the Democratic nominee for governor, is said to be conceding in Florida. I think we can go live there. Take a listen. We had been calling this too close to call, but apparently his internal pollsters know the full story.
I still believe that we ought to clean up our environment, our air, our water quality, our beaches, our shores. I still believe that we ought to have the kind of economy where people are able to work one job instead of 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. I'm extremely proud that this evening the voters of the state of Florida decided to pass Amendment 4. Proud about that. That is just one step closer to getting us where it is that we need to be as a state. Y'all, I want to encourage you not to give up. I want to encourage you to stick to the fight. I want you to know that every step of this way, even though I won't have the blessing of serving as the next governor of the state of Florida, I still plan to be on the front lines right alongside every single one of you when it comes to standing up for what it is that we believe in. As I said all along the campaign trail, power sees nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. we still have to be willing to show up every single day and demand our seat at the table. We got to be willing, inside of elections and outside of elections, to say that our voices still matter, that we still have relevance. I still believe and I still trust the voters. We may not have all shown up in the way that we thought and hoped that we would, but I still believe that there are still more of us who believe in what is common and what is decent and what is right. And I believe in the long run, good always wins out over evil. I still believe that. Many of you all along the trail heard me talk rather repeatedly about my grandmother. Someone pointed out that she was a real winner of the governor's race.
Andrew Gillum, the Democratic candidate for